What's up, Dragon Brew? Today we're going to be taking a look at another one of the free starter decks you get in Arena. Today we're going to be looking at Strength in Numbers, and we're going to be looking at how to upgrade it on a budget so if you like the deck, you still can play it and be competitive on the ladder and not just get smashed with this very basic beginner deck. So let's hop in and talk about what we don't like about the current list and how we're going to upgrade it. Alright, so again, I'd just like to clarify that we're going to go over a couple things here. I expect most of the people, or those of you that are watching that are still interested, are likely either going to be somebody who wants to just play a different deck that has a tight budget, whether that's on Arena for wildcards or in paper with cash, or maybe you're just starting out and you don't know how a deck works or why certain cards are good or bad. So we're going to answer that first, and then we'll talk about what we're upgrading and why. So let's start with this list, and Citizen's Crowbar. It's actually not a terrible card in the sense that whenever you play it, it creates a token, which is kind of nice, but it's not particularly great. I mean, you do have to spend 2 to equip it, and then the benefit of getting to remove an artifact or enchantment is actually only okay, but you're having to give up your card to do it. So this isn't something we probably want to play. There's just too much setup and requirement or whatever to make things happen. Hold for Ransom. This is a card that I don't love. However, it is a cheap way to remove a creature from attacking or blocking. Now, there are some downsides to this, but generally this card's going to be fine. It may make the final list just because we're on a budget, and, you know, sometimes you just gotta have removal. Now, Gala Greeters. I will admit, I'm a big fan of Gala Greeters and actually like playing multiple copies of this in other lists. However, we're going to be very tight for rares and mythics, so I don't know how many we're going to add to the list. But this card being able to get bigger, create treasure to make it easier to cast things, or just give you life gain against the other aggro decks is actually pretty nice in its versatility. So if we have room, I would like to upgrade and add more of these, but for now, we're going to at least leave the one that's in here. Now, Venom Connoisseur is a very interesting one. If we can make the final list something that creates enough creatures, then giving all of our stuff Death Touch is actually really nice, especially since we're likely to be attacking with a bunch of 1/1 tokens, or in some ways power increase tokens, but they're not necessarily threatening on their own, and there's a lot of times your opponent might want to just chump block them. But if you're able to give everything Death Touch like this is able to do, that becomes a real situation. This is very cheap to cast, and on the first creature that enters the battlefield, it gains Death Touch itself, but if you do it a second time, then all your other creatures gain Death Touch. And that means if your creatures damage the opposing creatures, they just die, no matter how big they are. So as much as I'm not generally a fan of this card in the fully built out list that I would play, I actually don't mind it for a budget list. Civil Servant. This card's actually really good, mostly because it's a 2/3 for 2, which means it's going to be able to battle and stay alive against most of the opponent's other 2 mana things, but also gets a bonus whenever you attack and gives lifelink. So yeah, probably going to play a full set of these, and it's only a common. Also like Join the Dance. Now, admittedly, it's not making citizen tokens or whatever, but being able to make more humans, and even after your board gets swept, being able to flash it back and make 2 more creatures is actually pretty reasonable for this list, so I don't mind this at all either. Now, sadly, this is a rare that I'm probably going to cut from the list. I actually wanted to try to build something with Park Heights Pegasus. However, we've tried a few different things, and I always scrap them before I even get to making a video because the card's just not great. But it is a 2/1 flyer that also happens to have trample, and if it deals damage to your player, you get to draw a card, but you have to have had 2 or more creatures into the battlefield under your turn. So it's like, this is just a lot to do to get the benefit. If this was simply, if you had 1 other creature come into play and then you dealt damage to the opponent, I think that would be reasonable. However, now it's very much on the brink. And unfortunately, it's not even like a Pegasus Citizen or anything like that. It's just a Pegasus. So it doesn't get the benefit of a lot of the other cards you're going to have that pump your team. So I don't know. I'm probably passing on this one. Adeline, very good on the other hand. If we have anything that's making tokens, this is going to be great, and it makes even more tokens. And it works well with our other cards, because again, something like Venom Connoisseur that cares about an additional creature coming into play, well, if you play a creature and then attack with Adeline, now everything you're attacking with is going to have Death Touch. So that's actually pretty solid. So no complaints here. We're probably going to find a way to add more Adelines to the list. Gathering Throng, I'm a little upset at Wizards for this card even being in the list because it only gives you 3 copies. Like, if you're going to include it, just include the 4th one. It's a common. Like, why would, who even decided this was a thing? Like, the benefit of this card is you can go search and get any other number of copies. Well, if you have 4, you can just go get all 3. Or if you don't want to have to discard anything, you go get 1 or 2, and then the next one you play, you go get the rest. But like, it's weird to not include a 4th copy. Either way, we're probably not playing this because for 3 mana, there's better things we could be doing. But yeah, if you don't have the other cards, feel free to play a full set of these if you're going to play them. We have 1 Halo Fountain, and this card's very weird, but it does allow you to make more creatures, and on the other hand, let you draw cards. So we're probably going to leave this one in here because it's fairly versatile. While not being great, it's not terrible. So Halo Fountain probably is going to survive the cut. Rumor Gatherer is an interesting one because when the first creature comes into play, you get to scry. If it's the second time, you get to draw. I don't hate that. My problem, though, is this is a 2/1 creature for 3 mana. If it was even a 2/2, I think I would give it more consideration. But at a 2/1, you can't even really fight anything in combat. It's going to die to everything. Even tokens kill it. So you end up just hoping you get cards off of it. But if you just draw it and don't get anything, it's going to feel real bad. So yeah, we're probably cutting this in favor of other better 3 mana things. Speaking of which, we have Wedding Announcement, which this card is great, by the way. If you're not playing this, or you're new and you don't understand, it makes up to 3 creatures, or allows you to draw cards if you attack with more than 1 creature that turn, and then after 3 turns, it flips to the backside, and all your creatures get +1/+1. And since you're playing so many tokens, anything that can give your stuff benefits are great. You know what I'm saying. Anyway, moving on. Taurens, also very good. If we play any creature, you get an additional green-white creature human soldier token, which also has training, which means if something that's bigger than it attacks, it also gets a bonus. So this is really, really good. And it's a rare, so it will eat up one of our slots if we want more than one of this. But between stuff like this and Wedding Announcement and Adeline, you get a lot of recovery options. If your board gets swept, you can rebuild a board fairly quickly. So I'm probably going to find some way to squeeze another one of these into the list. Celebrity Fencer, I kind of like being a 4 mana creature that comes into play, or not when it comes into play, but something else comes into play, gets a +1/+1 counter, which is permanent, and I like that. However, being a 3/2 for 4 and then still having to do something else to get a benefit is usually not great. It's a lot of setup. If this was at least a 3/3 and then the first counter was turning it into a 4/4, I like that. But the problem is having a 3 toughness thing for your 4 mana is usually not great unless you're getting a spectacular ability off of it, and we're not getting that here. Darling in the Masses. This actually pumps up all your other things and makes you a creature whenever you attack. So I'm kind of into this. Now, it does only give the +1 to other citizens, which is like Civil Servant and things like that, your Connoisseur. But even just being able to produce another token means when you attack, it's producing a 2/1 token instead of a 1/1 token. And the other cool thing is that if you have multiple Darlings and they're attacking, well, then they each produce tokens and each of those are bigger, including themselves now, helping each other. So I do like this card, and it's probably going to be one of the few things on the upper end of the casting cost of the deck, and it's one more thing that pumps our creatures, which we're definitely going to need if we're making lots of tokens. Take to the Streets. This is a tough one because it's kind of expensive for what it does, but it does give a big bonus to everything and can give stuff vigilance, so I kind of like that. But at 5 mana, we can almost just be doing something better, so there's a good chance we're going to cut this card as well. Luxurious Libations is actually kind of cute and interesting because it can be used offensively or defensively. Like you could pump a big creature if you're blocking, or pump a small creature if you're blocking a big creature, but also produce an additional one, which is nice. Or if one of your tokens gets through and you have mana open, you could just pump it to a 5 or a 6 and maybe finish off your opponent. So I kind of like the versatility that this offers. We'll probably try. We already have them in the list, so they might get to stay. Lands we'll talk about on the other side as we talk about the upgraded version here. Okay, so I'm not going to lie. This was a little bit more difficult than I thought because there was a lot of what felt like in-between small decisions having to be made along the way, and we just had to settle on something because my goal when doing these lists is to not introduce more than 9 or so rares and or mythics to the deck list than already exist. So to that end, we kind of had to make some tough choices, but I think we got at least to a reasonable list. So we've got 3 Hold for Ransom. These are from the original list. We're going to keep these. We also have Gala Greeters. And again, I wanted to add more, but we're on a budget. I would say if you have the budget and we can find room to squeeze them in, it's probably worth it. But for now, we're just going to play the 1. And this would be one of the first cards I replace. Unfortunately, I do like the idea of the Death Touch situation, but I don't know how often it's going to play out to be exactly what we want. So I would probably start by replacing the Connoisseurs with Gala Greeters if you have them, but if not, Connoisseur is just going to have to get the job done. Civil Servant, probably next on the chopping block. while it's nice and can give us lifelink, ultimately, I think some of those other cards are better. So again, if you want to replace some things you don't have, Civil Servant's probably next up. Join the Dance makes multiple blockers. We're playing a full set of those. We just maxed those out. We did find room for one more add-a-line, so we're adding an additional one of those. One of the cards we added to the list is totally not a rare or a mythic, but 3 borrowed time. And this is important because it can get rid of bigger creatures that you're just not able to remove, but additionally remove things like enchantments, let you get rid of planeswalkers, things like that. So you don't have to worry about it. This just removes it until borrowed time goes away, which a lot of times just means it gets to stay exiled. Now, we did say we're going to keep the one Halo Fountain, so there it is. But if you would, again, like to replace something else, Halo Fountain's probably next in line to be cut. Probably because we'd like to have a 4th wedding announcement. But again, we're on a budget, so you had to be kind of tight. So, 3 wedding announcement it is. One of the new cards we decided to add was 3 copies of King Darien Extra Large the 8th. And the cool part about this card is that not only does it pump all your creatures, it doesn't care if they're humans, if they're citizens, whatever, which is awesome. It also allows you to sacrifice and protect your creatures. Now, you can't protect token creatures from, let's say, a Meat Hook Massacre, but if there's something that just destroys all creatures or anything similar to that, then you can go ahead and sacrifice this and keep your dudes. But also importantly, you can use that in blocking situations as well. So if you do have situations where your tokens happen to already be a 2/2 or 3/3 even without King Darien, you could block in ways that you could sacrifice your dudes, still kill off your opponent's stuff, and get a big attack in going the other way. So King Darien's very good card for this list. And it can also produce tokens on its own if you end up in a weird stalemate situation. Or if you just draw it late. Taurens, we're playing one more. Again, just being able to go wide, build our board. Nothing wrong with that. We're going to max out Darling of the Masses because it just makes more tokens and really fits what we're doing. And then we decided to just leave the 2 Luxurious Libation, and I think that's fine. Looking at the rest of the list, we have 9 plains, 9 forests. And the lands here get a little sketchy, but what I would say is if you do have the resources, you will want to max out the Overgrown Farmland. I think it's arguable over what people would like to swap in or out. I decided to go with Extra Botanica Plaza, so actually you can draw cards later in the game. I don't think the incidental life gain you're going to get off of the Blossoming Sands matters that much, especially if you're going to keep the Civil Servant and stuff like that in the list. You can gain enough life to make up for that. So I'm a big fan of being able, if you have to play this, let's try to draw extra cards. Or if you have them, Jetmir's Garden, so you could cycle it as well if that's an option you want to go with because it can produce green and white, but that's up to you. But yeah, Overgrown Farmland I think is a must. I would go with that. But otherwise, just remove your Blossoming Sands and then slowly replace 1 plains, 1 forest, 1 plains, 1 forest till you get to the lands that you actually have. But yeah, this is the whole list, and I think it's way better than where the list started. Now, I think the final list here is way more versatile than where we were, and I think the individual cards are stronger, and that should help you out a ton. However, if you did like this deck and you're looking for other budget lists, check out this video I have where I have 4 other budget lists that are standard viable right now if you want to check them out. That's all I have for you for now. We'll see you next time.